Meeting to order for today. First item is approval of today's agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve with agenda addition.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve today's agenda with the addition. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Citizens to be heard. Any citizens on any item that is not on today's agenda? Seeing none. Approval of minutes from the September 24th meeting.
Move approval. Second.
Motion and a second to approve September 24th meeting minutes. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Approval of payment of bills and vouchers.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion and a second to pay the bills. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Annual State Auditors Report. Bob, come on up. Good morning.
Good morning. I've brought with me today Tim Swanson, who's the lead auditor on the Cook County Audit.
Good morning.
I wasn't sure if all the board knows her, so I just thought it'd be
Yeah,
a
thank
good
you.
opportunity to bring her with
Thank you.
and introduce her. Give you a chance to have the handouts go around. Okay, I think I'll just get started if that's okay.
Please.
First of all, I just wanted to point out that Clay County has a very, very good staff that does a lot of work on helping prepare for the audit. They're all very, very helpful, and we appreciate that. So I just wanted the county board to know that you've got a very good, dedicated staff.
Thank you.
I'm just going to run through some financial information similar to what we've done in the past. And then we'll kind of run through the schedule of findings, so you know what the findings were. And at any point in time, if you have any questions, just stop me and ask the questions. So, okay. I've got a number of handouts. The first one is labeled handout number 1. There's a lot of financial information on that handout. I'll first talk a little bit about the government-wide financial information. That's at the very top. And then we'll move down into the fund level financial information. The state auditor does have some recommendations on some of the balances related to the fund level. So we'll go through the financial information, and then, like I said, I'll go through the schedule of findings. The first thing I wanted to point out is that your net position at December 31st, 2018 is $117,197,000. That's up about $9,963,000 from the previous year. Your largest increase is net investment in capital assets. That went up $4,714,000. And it's due to an increase in governmental activities of about $5,256,000. Your capital assets for governmental activities went up $16,538,000. But the debt related to those capital assets also went up. That went up $11,281,000. The increases in your governmental activities were offset by a decrease in business type activities of about $541,000. Capital assets for business type activities went up $2,912,000, and the debt related to that went up $3,454,000. Your restricted net position increased by $636,000. That's due to an increase in governmental activities of about $510,000. The restrictions related to that are an increase in debt service, increase in conservation of natural resources, and that was offset by a decrease in restricted for your highways and streets. And then there was also an increase in business type, or restrictions for increase in business type of about $125,000. The restriction for closure, post-closure on your landfill went up about $13,000. Health went up about $16,000, and capital projects went up about $95,000. So that explains your net positions and changes in net positions. Your unrestricted also increased by $4,612,000. that's kind of the net effect of increases in fund balances and so on and so forth. The thing I'd like to point out on that is that's the part of your net position that's available for making decisions. Obviously, your net investment in capital assets, you can't make decisions because you've got that already tied up in capital assets. And the restrictions you can't make decisions on because there's legal restrictions that require you to spend that money in that way. So, any questions on net position? Okay. I'll move down to the fund balances. Generally speaking, we just present the three larger fund balance or larger funds when we present to the county board. The state auditor recommends that you have at least enough cash on hand in your general fund to sustain 6 months of operation. That's primarily because that fund relies so much on your levy, and you know that you don't collect your levy until June. So we want to make sure that you have enough cash on hand to sustain operations. At December 31st, 2018, the cash balance in the general fund was $9,196,000. That would cover you for about 4.6 months of expenditures in that fund. If we considered the internal service fund, which Clay County likes me to present it that way, the cash balance for the general fund and internal service fund combined is $11,134. That would cover you for about just a little bit over 5 months. So you're getting pretty close to that recommendation in the state auditor. Your road and bridge fund had a cash balance of $4,780,000. That would cover expenditures for about 5.2 months worth of operations. And the social service fund had a cash balance of $7,074,000, and that would cover you for just about 4 months worth of expenditures. The state auditor also has a recommendation for unrestricted fund balance, that you have enough unrestricted fund balance to cover 5 months worth of expenditures and fall somewhere between 35 and 50% of operating revenues. Your general fund had an unrestricted fund balance at December 31st, 2018 of $6,947,000. That would cover about 3.5 months or 3.5 months worth of expenditures. It is 27.5% of your operating revenues. The road and bridge fund had an unrestricted fund balance of $4,423,000. That would cover almost 5 months worth of expenditures and is about 35% of your operating revenues. And your social service fund had an unrestricted fund balance of $7,339,000. That would cover just a little bit over 4 months worth of expenditures and is 33% of your operating revenues. Now, the state auditor's recommendation isn't on a fund by funds basis. It's your general fund and special revenue funds combined. So the unrestricted fund balance of your special revenues and your general fund combined is $18,791,000. That would cover about 4 months worth of expenditures and is 31% of operating revenues. So it's just slightly below the recommended fund balance, unrestricted fund balance of the state auditor. Now, I want to point out that's a recommendation. There may be reasons for having different varying balances, and that's up to the board. We just put out a guidance essentially so that you know about where you should be, and if you're way out of whack from that, you should be able to explain why you're way out of whack from that. You're not way out of whack from that, so I think your fund balances your unrestricted fund balance is pretty good. Total fund balances at December 31st, the general fund had a total fund balance of $10,047,000. Road and bridge had a total fund balance of $4,935,000, and social services had a total fund balance of $7,429,000. Any questions to this page? I know it's a lot of information in a short period of time.
Mr. Chair, Bob, just to kind of mention with our numbers from both of the examples you provided, that's been consistent from where we were last year also. You're kind of in that same range of months in different areas.
Yeah, pretty much the cash balances for your general fund is down about, well, last year we had 4.7 months this year 4.6. Your road and bridge fund would cover about 10 months last year. It's about 5.2. You had a lot of expenditures in road and bridge this year. And social services was actually 3.9 months last year for the cash balance and 3.9 months this year, so pretty consistent. Okay.
But, so Bob, but you could have, a county board could, in a one-year budget, have something in there that's kind of a one-time deal that could really
Yes.
skew things too.
Yep.
When you start comparing year to year. For example, what we're about to do for 2020, there's a significant increase that's going to be on the expenditure side that might really skew things a little bit,
It certainly can, and
Yeah.
if you have a year of very high expenditures in a particular fund, this is a ratio of your
Right.
cash balance to the expenditures, so it's just meant to be guidance.
Yeah. And I just want to make one other comment, and this goes to people who might be watching, and you're at the very start of your message here to us, you mentioned that the increase in government-wide funds was $9,963,000. I just want to make sure that the public understands that we're not talking cash here.
No. no, it's-
It could be, but I think somebody listening outside or watching us, whether it's on the internet or whatever, when they hear that, they might not follow along with what all that is. It has to do with a lot of different assets. That's incorporating our construction of our new buildings and all
Yes.
those things into place. So I just kind of a little educational piece for our public that might be watching.
Okay.
Thank you.
The next handouts I'm going to go through fairly fast. I've been asked by a lot of my clients to just kind of present a 5-year trend. So I've put together numbers for the last 5 years and some graphs. The first one is related to revenues, and basically, there's only a couple of things I want to point out on that. Is basically your revenue sources, the larger revenue sources are actually taxes and intergovernmental revenue. If you look at your taxes have been a fairly steady increase each year. We had a little bit of spike in 2018. That's partly because the sales tax that you implemented took place. Intergovernmental revenues dropped down a little bit in 2015, but has been kind of a steady increase since then. And then if you move on to handout number 3, that's related to the expenditures. And just a couple of things I'm going to point out on that. You can take a look at this in more detail at your leisure, but the expenditures basically are, the ones that are the major expenditures, and this is kind of typical, is general government, public safety, highways and streets, and human services. And the other thing that I wanted to point out on yours is your capital expenditures. If you look at the last 2 years, 17 and 18, they spiked. It's all related to all those capital projects that you've had. And as you pointed out, Kevin, that's part of that net position. Those new buildings and things are part of that $9 million increase. And your debt has also increased a little bit each year, and that again is related to all the projects that you've been doing. You've been issuing some debt to pay for some of those projects. And if we move on to handout number 4, these are fund balances, and you can kind of just look at the graphs and see what the trends are. Overall, if you do a comparison, and I don't know how much sense this makes because it's just comparing one year to the other, and it depends on, like if 2014 was a really low year, it would show things as being increasing more. But I like to just kind of present the graph so you can kind of see the changes and see if there's trends, and then just do a comparison of this year compared to 5 years ago. And your total fund balance in the general fund has gone up about $564,000 from what it was 5 years ago. Your unrestricted is up about $61,000. And you can kind of see the trends. That one's gone up and down a little bit each year over the last 4 years. But overall, you've increased about $564,000 in total fund balance. Your road and bridge fund, again, you can kind of look at the charts and graphs and see what the unrestricted and total fund balance, the variances each year, but over the 5-year period if you do a comparison from 2018 back to 2014, your unrestricted went up $3,359,000 in your road and bridge fund, and your total fund balance has actually gone down about $1,697,000.
Of all of these different funds, this is the most difficult one to have trust in these numbers.
Yes.
And I say that from the standpoint of as to when our auditor can record monies received, for example, on a project versus when they're paid out. They could
Yeah.
happen in different years.
There's large swings in the
Yeah.
road and bridge fund, so that fund you wanna look at over a longer period
Right.
of time. And then the last fund that I've got presented, or graphs presented, is the social service or human service fund. Your unrestricted over that 5-year period has gone down about $966,000, and total fund balance is down about $876,000. Again, you can see it went down in 2015 and 16, both the total and unrestricted, and then back up some in 2017, 18, so you're back on that upward trend. We don't like to see those trends go on for a long period on a downward trend, so it looks like that, it has made the change and we're coming back up again. Any questions at all on the finances? Okay, I'll move on to the schedule of findings and question costs. The very first page is there because you had a single audit. You received over $750,000 with federal awards. In this page, when we send the packet into the clearinghouse, they can look at this and tell a lot about your audit. We gave you an unmodified opinion on your financial statements. That's a good opinion. That's the one that you want. We did have some issues on internal control over financial reporting, so we have one that we considered a material weakness, and we've got a couple of other items that we noted as findings. We call them significant deficiencies. There were no issues related to non-compliance with non-compliance material to the financial statements. We had some issues with one of your federal award programs too, so we have a material weakness identified there and other reportable items. We gave you an unmodified opinion for your federal award programs, except for the Medicaid cluster program, which is qualified. We had enough items related to eligibility that we ended up qualifying that program. Any audit findings disclosed that are recorded or required to be reported in accordance with the new uniform guidance, and yes, there were some. And the programs that we tested this year were the Child Support Enforcement Program and the Medicaid cluster. And for 2018, Clay County was not considered a low-risk auditee for your federal award programs because the item that we're reporting this year was one that was reported in the past. So until we get a clean report for 2 years in a row, we have to do additional testing on federal award programs. Okay. First item is segregation of duties. This one I think everybody is familiar with. We've reported it for years and years. What we're talking about is the individual departments. You have some small departments that collect fees, and you have limited staff in those departments, so the person who collects the fees has the custody function, and they also record those fees until they accumulate enough, and then they bring it over to the auditor treasurer's office. Once it's brought over here, you've got good segregation of duties, so we're just talking about those fee offices. I've resolved this in a couple of counties. We have a couple of our counties who have actually, they go out and do some departmental audits on their own. They also do some variance analysis and record the fees coming in, and if there's anomalies, they go out and check on the reasons for those anomalies. So it is something that could be resolved, but we see it reported in most of our counties. So the next item is dealing with prior period adjustment. Last year there was an error in the report. It was found actually by Clay County staff as you were preparing for the 2018 audit. And in 2017 you had a lot of construction related to the jail and law enforcement construction projects. Unfortunately, some of the payables that were recorded as payables and as contracts payable also, so they got double reported, so we had to do a prior period adjustment to correctly reflect what it really should have been. And I guess our recommendation on that is that as they're preparing for financial reporting, make sure somebody else is reviewing the work and things like that to try and catch those things before they happen. The next item is this is the one that I had mentioned on the federal awards program, which we have the qualification. It's dealing with the eligibility testing. As we were going through case files, out of the 40 case files tested, we found exceptions in 19 of those 40 case files of where the documentation in the case file did not match the documentation in the Maxis system. Does that mean that the recipients were ineligible for the program? No. It means the documentation didn't match. And it's very important to have the documentation matching, because if it isn't, it could result in people, receiving benefits that didn't actually qualify for the program. There's kind of a list of the things. We had 19 cases. Some of them had multiple things that we noted. And I'll leave that to you to review it in your own time. And then, if we move on to page 14, we had a finding on procurement suspension debarment. That's another one of those newer uniform guidance requirements. It's been out for a couple of years, but it relates again to the medical assistance program. The federal regulations state that non-federal entities must maintain records sufficient to detail the history of procurement, and that the records should include, but are not necessarily limited to, the following: the rationale for the method of procurement, selection of contract type, contractor selection or rejection, and the basis of the contract price. And it further goes on to talk about if you have expenditures with a vendor over $25,000, you have to comply with the requirements for debarment, suspension, and exclusions. Out of the five procurement transactions tested that were over the $3,000, we had 2 of them that were over $25,000 and 1 that was over $100,000 included in that sample. We found 2 small purchases tested did not have written documentation to support the rationale for the method of procurement, basis of contractor selection, and documentation of full and open competition. And all 3 covered transactions did not have verification of whether the vendors were debarred, suspended, or otherwise excluded. Again, what we're talking about is documentation. It doesn't, if you went out and you checked, those vendors were not suspended, debarred, but you just didn't have the documentation in your case files that support that. In moving on to page 15, we have a finding on Department of Human Services, DHS 2556 reporting. Again, that relates to the medical assistance program. The Minnesota Department of Human Services instructions for completing the Social Service Fund report, DHS 2556, bulletin number 173217, provides the contracted services for clients or public assistance or public aid assistance includes all amounts paid to companies or individuals who are not on the county payroll who provide services to or for their clients. As we were going through the 2556 reports, we found expenditures for volunteer drivers that were incorrectly reported as social service charges rather than contracted services for clients or public aid assistance. Basically what the result of this is that the contractor services, expenditures for drivers, amounted to about $82,000 and were not included as contracted services for client or public aid, and was not subtracted from the total expenditures reported in the calculation for the total SSTS federal expense claim cost pool amount. So you're over-reported. And basically, our recommendation is to make sure that those costs end up getting posted to the proper object codes in your general ledger so that they get on the report in the right place. And that
Was
you should,
Excuse me, was that a change from how it was reported in the prior year?
I believe it was not.
Okay.
It was just something that we ended up catching this year. And then also contact Minnesota Department of Human Services to see if you should be resubmitting for 2018.
Bob, in our interview that I sat in with you on this prior to this, wasn't there some question from our Human Services Department regarding that issue on how those volunteer driver dollars are split up? Wasn't there an issue with that?
I remember some discussion on that. I don't remember the details of that.
Yeah, okay. I didn't know if there was follow-up after that from Rhonda on that.
I haven't heard anything from her.
I think they had contacted DHS, if I remember right. And then the next item, we're on page 17 now, is dealing with the electronic fund transfer policy. You do have a policy in place, but as we looked through the policy, we saw that it missed part of the requirements of certain statutes. The county board is required under Minnesota statute 471.381 subdivision 3 and 385.071 to establish policies and procedures for investments and expenditure transactions via electronic fund transfer that include policy controls in Minnesota statute 471.38 subdivision 3A. That's the part that's actually missing, is complying with the 471.38 subdivision 3A. So we're just recommending that you have your policy updated to include the controls that are required under that statute. Okay. And then the last final thing is publication of board minutes. Minnesota statute 375.12 states within 30 days of each meeting, the county board must have official proceedings of its sessions or summary published in a qualified newspaper of general circulation. Of the 12 published summaries reviewed, 6 were not published within the 30 days. Some of them were just like a day or two late, but we just kind of wanted to point out that to comply with Minnesota statute 375.112, the publication should take place within 30 days. And that concludes.
Mr. Chair, I want to go back and I want to comment on page 10 regarding the accounts payable. One of the things that I asked about there, because had accounts payable in that kind of money been, say, doubled up in a general fund, for example, it really could have skewed our unrestricted funds. Because it could have been showing that we had money that needed to be paid out that really didn't.
Well, yeah, that's essentially what it was, is an account, a payable got reported as both an
Yeah,
accounts payable.
but my point is, if that would have been associated with the general fund or human services, it would have really impacted, it would have reduced what our unrestricted funds would have been on paper. Right? Because it would show us as an additional liability. But the fact of the matter, what it boils down to is this was in regards to a construction project, which is outside of the general fund. Right, Laurie?
Right.
So I guess my point is even though this error had occurred, it wouldn't have made any changes to any unrestricted balances that we have.
Well, it was in your capital projects fund, so it's
Yeah.
just in a different fund.
Right, yeah.
But yes,
But-
it was doubling up on the liability
Yeah.
in that fund.
Yeah, yeah. But those projects are outside of the three main ones that we looked at
It's
here.
outside of the three main that
Right.
were presented here, yes. Yeah.
That's what I just wanted
I
to.
wasn't quite sure what your
Yeah, that's
question
what I was,
Sorry.
that's where I was going with that. It was, if that's outside of
Yeah.
the three main, yeah.
I have questions on the maxes. I sat in on that meeting last year, and I think there were several different situations similar to this, and I don't know if is it the program that makes it difficult to double check on things? Do other counties that use Maxis see those same findings?
We've had that finding in several of our counties. When we had our field exit, we were talking with Rhonda and Larry a little bit, and Larry pointed out that he thinks part of the issue is that some of those case files have been out there for a long,
They're so
long period
old.
of time.
Yeah.
And so as they have clients come in, sometimes they don't go through every single screen in the Maxis and ask every single question. So he's kind of thinking the current files, all the current stuff in recent years is pretty good. It's mostly things that popped up that are still in the case file from years ago or still in Maxis from years ago, and it's just gonna take some time going through and kind of looking back and getting the staff aware that you've got to look at all the screens and ask all the questions and not just like current changes that have happened in the last year.
Okay.
Yeah, Commissioner Mojo, that was a good question, and I think part of what we're have to deal with here is their workload too, and how much they can do, and one of the questions that I asked is, well, what are the consequences of these findings in terms of could we lose out on federal funding or something like that? And that answer, I think your answer to that was, well, we don't know.
Yeah, basically, I can't give you an answer. on
Right,
that.
so, but,
Whether you would-
so at some point, we just have to be cautious of this, and our staff is well aware of that, but at what point do you risk, based on these workloads, do you risk losing federal funding because of findings like this that might be labor-related in terms of how much they have to do? And at what point do you, and so I think one of the conversations that I had with Rhonda was, do we need to relook at how do we audit or go through this process to make sure that somebody should be doing an ultimate check to make sure that these two programs are equal.
Right.
Because if they're not, we get right up.
And I guess my question is, I sign up for things online all the time where I literally can't go to the next step without entering certain information. And so if we have a program that doesn't have those mechanisms in place, it's a different level. It's human error to a point, but I mean, that's where my question is the issue, yes, we may have some steps that we need to put in place to catch some of this, but is it the program that's problematic?
The important thing here is because the two didn't match equally, didn't mean there was anything done wrong,
Not necessarily.
right? I mean, it's just that
Other than
there was
the
no
documentation that was
verification.
updated.
For example, I think there was one about a trailer home. I think I heard something about a trailer
Right.
home. That was, on one record it showed as the trailer home still existed as an asset, on another one it didn't. Well,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that what that recipient might have qualified for would have changed.
Correct.
That's the point I'm trying to make here, but those are things that I think we'll have to work on, but.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Well, thank
That
you for the
worked, yeah.
opportunity to come and present.
Thanks.
Yep, thanks, Brad.
Thanks for doing your job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is approval to submit requests for proposals for food service management contracts for the correctional facility and detox and detention. Morning.
Good morning. Yes, we're here to request to put out a proposal for a food service for not only the jail, but detention and detox. We're looking at a 3-year contract. We haven't had a new contract in several years. We've done addendums to our current food provider. The whole point was that we'd have a new kitchen in our facility that could provide the services. We were hoping for January 1. That's not likely to happen, so we have a tentative date in here of January 2020. We are requesting that we are allowed to go ahead and put this and get this published so that we can start looking at bids for that. This has been reviewed by James as well as Troy from Detox and County Attorney's Anthony Wagle.
Julie, because this is the first time probably in a long, long time since Clay County's had a kitchen.
Correct.
I don't know if we ever did have a kitchen.
They did, I think, when they opened.
Okay, that might have been in that 1892 jail.
Yeah. It was long before me, so.
Okay, but, so because this is, I know your transition team did a lot of different things, and I'm assuming they even kind of went through this. Did we ever go and look at other jails that have a kitchen to see what their policy looks like? I just don't know if we could be missing something, or...
So how I came up with this RFP is I dusted off my old ones. Obviously, I had quite a few that I'd written in the past years. But then I went to Douglas County, which is Minnesota,
Good.
and they
Okay.
recently put a kitchen in when
Yep.
they built their new facility.
Okay.
And I asked for a copy of theirs, and it was pretty much verbatim of what I'd been using.
Okay.
The only difference is I really need to change the verbiage that we'd be cooking on-site as opposed to off-site, and a couple things as far as like utensils that are provided and things like that, so.
Okay.
And having that kitchen available really benefits the juvenile center because we operate a school and we're eligible for commodities. And having that kitchen, Clay County having that kitchen, means that they can accept the commodities on our behalf and reimburse us, so it's $10,000 a year.
One of the differences on this RFP, though, is I am requesting 3 different bids for each agency. So the jail would have a different bid as opposed to detox and detention because we are the place that has the kitchen. And so we should see, I think, a lower cost on detention or detox, because there's delivery involved with their meals as opposed to we would be on site. So there would be 3 bid forms in the packet.
How many meals do you provide a year between?
Well, you know, right now we're averaging, well, every month it's different, but when I wrote this, it was 115 we're averaging a day. So you times that times 3 for the jail alone, times 365, that's our number, and then you add detention and detox. It's a pretty substantial
Yours could end up
contract
to
for
potentially
somebody.
90.
Good, yes.
I mean,
Yeah, that's what,
that's what it's going to be built for.
yes, sir.
So in the contract, we put the high bed number in there for the potential, but we also provided an average daily population.
I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the request. Any further discussion?
I see in here that you have an area talking about specialized diets and therapeutic diets. I assume that includes like food allergies?
Yep, that's a medical diet.
Okay, all right.
I have a
And
question.
so how,
Sure.
and so how, if we're preparing it in one area, do you have fail-safe ways to, I mean, how do you prepare, 5 or 6 food allergies in the same kitchen without contaminating?
For example, a
Ask.
common one we have is onions, and so they just prepare it separately, you don't put onions in that main portion of the meal.
Gotcha.
They do it every day now in our off-site services, it's pretty common.
Jim?
I had a question. Clay County has quite a few pork producers.
Mm-hmm.
Will pork be on the menu in the jail and the facilities now?
That depends on the vendor who provides our food service.
Okay. Will that be in the RFP then?
That we provide pork? No.
Okay.
Any other questions? All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Update on financial status of juvenile center. Okay, and-
Chair, Commissioner, do we want to take the addition first?
Sure, we can do that. The addition is request of construction change order number 26.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. As you see before you, we do have a change order, number 26. All the items related to the change order are for the Juvenile Center project. It's a two-part request for your consideration this morning. The first portion has to do with all of the general contingency changes that you've seen in a normal change order. Today we have a list of items, both debits and credits. The total dollar amount before you is $92,492. A significant portion of the items here have to do with code issues, with fire. We've had a number of conversations over the last few months about that, and this addresses not all of them, but some of those changes. And so, again, we have dampers, we have fire suppression things, and also some of the issues of having to move ceilings to address some of those different issues for dampers and things. And so, unless there's specific questions about anything listed in here, James and I probably can provide some insight to those. The total dollar amount for that, again, is $92,492. The second portion of the change order today, as the board's aware from the jail project and the correction center project and the law enforcement center, construction engineers has taken the practice of whether a contingency issue is a owner issue or a contractor issue. They've been crediting our owner issues to their contingencies, and as we're well aware, we've gotten to the point where we depleted our owner contingencies, and we are also getting to the point where there's no contractor contingencies remaining. And so, of the total credits that have been provided, there's been about $113,383 that should have been owner contingencies that were credited to the contractor contingencies. And what in talking with Lori and talking with Tom from Construction Engineers, what we've come up with is a request of transferring $75,000 or crediting $75,000 of our contingency back to the contractor. And so that would bring a grand total of the change request of $167,492. With that, I would turn it over to the board for any questions.
Questions, Jenny?
I know you've talked about this at length in these committee meetings, but it's crazy to me. These change orders are absolutely crazy. That, there's fire issues that, how are those not planned and budgeted for? I mean, this is enormous. And obviously, I'm not against it because we need this, but we hire firms to study this so that we don't get into this process and have $75,000 and then $90,000. It's just, we're bleeding money on this project.
We all are in agreement with those statements. And again, if there's any testimony as to why someone should look at new construction versus remodel when in certain cases, this is a prime example of what can happen. Now, I'm not saying that this is probably still going to be a lesser cost than if we would have gone out and constructed new. Don't get me wrong here. And these contingency dollars that we're talking about, whether they're owner or contractor contingencies, it's all still Clay County money. Having said that, when we sit in these meetings and there's certain things, for example, there's no way of knowing until you rip walls down. There was no way of knowing that some of these beams that were hidden up above ceilings didn't have the fire-coated paint, for example, that's needed. That's just one example of many. And until you don't know, and this is one area where I can't understand why we didn't know, but why in certain areas pipes didn't line up and you know, we've had plumbing issues from in the basement. We had to re-plumb stuff going back from way, the very beginning on this. So I agree with you that this is very frustrating. And I oftentimes ask the same question, but unless we would have let our engineering firm, or our construction engineers, for example, go in and tear into these things prior to even making a bid, you know, some of that stuff they have to just guess on.
And I think the example that you provided with the fire protection is, when you looked at it, in this example, when you looked at it, it looked like it was done. When you took the HVAC material out, they didn't do the proper, I guess, work the first time.
Well,
And-
it's might not even be that. It could be changes to code since the first time it was done.
Yeah.
So you have, and that's where, I think that's where a lot of our issues we're finding have been, is that the codes have changed. And so to get the, you know, the inspectors to sign off on it now, you got to bring those things up to the new code. So, but anyway, I could go on, but it's, your point is well taken.
Okay, what are the board's wishes on this?
Is this all under one motion? Change order
Change
26?
order, the financial plan is the second.
Yeah, I would move approval of change order number 26.
We have a motion and a second to approve the change order request. Any further discussion?
Another question.
Jenny?
Can we forecast any other enormous change orders? Have you heard?
Nothing significantly huge. All the ceilings are removed now, so we can see about 99% of everything right now. With this plan that I got here, I have a very, very high estimate of what we would need and plan to address those costs.
That wasn't even James's high estimate, that was my high estimate.
we're,
Don't blame him.
We're well over 90% complete on the project, so
Yep.
hopefully we shouldn't have too many more things coming up now, so.
So, last time we reported to you, I told you we'd come back and show you what, you know, what these change orders have done and what we could anticipate in future change orders before this thing is done. And where in the world is the money going to come from? And so this is kind of that plan. And so, James, if you want to.
Mr. Chair, did we have a vote?
I'm
We haven't
sorry.
voted
I'm
yet,
sorry.
no,
Yeah, I'm
so-
sorry.
Any other discussion on this item on the change order? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Okay, now the financial update.
All right, so my understanding of this is that construction-related costs were over 90% done, 91.7%, and we've spent 88.5% of our bonded money to meet that 91%. So virtually all the systems, materials, everything's on site. It's just labor costs now, just putting it all together and making it work. Where we have issues is with contingencies and some shortfalls in our FF&E, which is furnitures, fixtures, and equipment. Taking the owner's contingency and the contractor's contingency, which is, like Commissioner Campbell said, Clay County money, we're in the hole about $156,000. We know of about $30,000 of contingencies that are going to be coming. And just taking a high estimate of unknown contingencies, again, we have everything opened up. I don't foresee it being close to this, but a high conservative estimate would be $170,000.
Yeah, and I want to say that wasn't James's number. I put that in there. Just I'm trying to think what could be our worst-case scenario for right now that could happen. Because we have a board meeting with our regional group on October 17th, and we want to be able to share this with them as well. So that number, I'm hoping that's far less than the 170, but even if it got to that.
It better be
Well,
lower than that. I mean,
I know, but
I know it's high, but
yeah.
that's,
But I just wanted just to show,
cut some of the wants then if it, that.
So then, just moving along, the FF&E, again, high estimate, worst case scenario, 100,000. When you apply the extra bond dollars that we got in the 2018 revenues or expenditures, that's kind of the plan to purchase, I guess, to finance this shortfall would be to use the extra bond dollars and the revenues over expenditures from 2018. And even with this high estimate going through it, we had 345,000 revenues over expenditures in 2018, so even expending all that to cover up for this shortfall, we'd still have over 100,000 in revenues over expenditures from 2018 left.
And this plan basically would make sure that we're not going out to Clay County or to any of our other member counties to ask for additional dollars. It'll all be covered under this plan, so.
Okay, any other questions for these gentlemen about this project? Okay, thank you. Next item is request for planning and zoning to purchase vehicle from Highway Department. Matt, morning.
Morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. So the opportunity came up for us to purchase a vehicle from the County Highway Department. The reason for that is currently we're reserving vehicles from our county fleet system, and mainly for performing inspections, conducting site visits, attending meetings. We've run into some issues as we've increased our inspections where we're not able to reserve a vehicle. There might not be a vehicle available, or there's been several instances where we've reserved a vehicle through our system and only to find out that the vehicle is still out or not available. And that's caused some issues where we've had appointments with residents and we've been either late or not able to, we've had to cancel those appointments with our residents on inspections. Another issue is that of the fleet vehicles available to us, none of them have four-wheel drive, and there are several instances where we're going out to sites and we're not able to access those sites just because the road to get to them is a little too rough. The Highway Department has a 2013 GMC Acadia with 80,000 miles. The thought would be and they had a trade-in price quoted at $10,240. So our thought would be to use internal service funds to purchase that and then move some funds around in our existing, or in our proposed 2020 planning and zoning budget to pay back the internal service fund over a period of 5 years. So not asking for a increase in our budget at all, just moving some money around to be able to.
So is Dave going to warranty this for you then? So, his department? So, I'm just kidding. Jenny.
Well, he did give me a test drive and it was
Yeah.
a nice car, so.
Well,
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea, particularly because we've given your department more direction to have more landowner visits, more get eyes on what's going on, and so you can report to the planning commission those site photos and such. So I think it's an important piece. I would suggest maybe continuing to add dollars into the internal service fund after this is purchased and forward thinking for the replacement of what this vehicle would be.
Sure.
I think working that out is important.
Okay. Absolutely.
Any other questions for Matt on this?
I guess I just have to agree with Jenny there that, like I was out with you a couple of weeks ago, and I know you're going out quite a bit more, and which is good. And yeah, there is a need for a good vehicle when you're out there in some of those places that are being built in the wooded area, or whatever you want to call it. But, yeah, I certainly agree with this, and I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion and a second to approve the request. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Next item, request to hire 2 new full-time custodial staff. Georgia. Good morning.
Good morning. With the new correctional facility ready to open phase 2, we're preparing for that. The needs for custodial staff will increase over in that building. To also meet the hours that they're requesting that we clean in that facility, we've tried several times to hire variable hour staff, but because of the later hours, we're not able to accommodate that. So we're looking to hire 2 full-time custodial staff. Those 2 won't necessarily clean full-time at the correctional facility, but we will be able to accommodate the needs there. For the 2, it's $114,500 approximately, and that would include salary and benefits.
Okay, questions for Georgia? We discussed this at PIC and, understand the need for it. They wouldn't start till the beginning of the year.
Right,
though,
after January. The hiring process, just the fingerprints, the last 2 that for variable hour took 6 weeks just to get the fingerprints. So by the time we advertise 2 weeks interview, we're probably we wouldn't hire them till after January 1st.
Any other questions for George on this? Board's wishes?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the request. Any further discussion?
So these were part of the new additions in your budget?
New requests.
New requests?
They were, yes.
Okay.
Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Thanks, Georgia.
Thank you.
Next item, request for approval of resolution 2019-36 for speed zone study. Dave. Good morning, Dave.
Morning. After some recent discussions with the city of Moorhead, and I know our highway committee has met on this for years, I do feel it would be a good idea to maybe go back to MnDOT, request a speed study. There's a lot of concerns up in this area. The speeds jump around a little bit. It starts at 40 as you go by American Crystal. Then it gets real wide open. There's a lot of agriculture, a lot less density of homes. It jumps up to 55. And then as you get to Crystal Creek, it goes back down to 40. So it's a little irregular. I think the local people that drive through there do feel comfortable driving that, but there has been a lot of improvements to MB Johnson Park. We also have a straight bike lane out there, as well as the city's annexed this area. So with those changes, I guess I feel it does warrant a request for a speed study.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the request. Any further discussion?
Excuse me.
No, you go.
Is all this area in the city limits of Moorhead?
Yeah, it goes all the way to 70th Avenue, so it goes actually about 1.5 miles or so north of this area yet.
Jenny?
I was just gonna say, this is definitely warranted. I thought it would be fun to take my family on a bike route from at Johnson Park over Wall Street into Fargo, and people zoom by, and it is, I mean, especially if they're developing that with more trails and whatnot, I think it's important to probably.
And I think they hold cross-country events at the park now, so a lot of times not a lot of times, but when they do have an event, there's a lot of traffic in this area.
Okay, we have any other discussion on this request? We have a motion. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Next item, request for approval of 2020 taxing resolutions 2019-34 and 2019-35 for the Buffalo Red River Watershed District. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Commissioners, I guess if my math serves me correctly, this is about the 10th year we've been here for the same thing. Watershed allows for a taxation of its citizens, I guess, which we cover parts of 4 counties, Clay, Becker, Wilkin, and Otter Tail, by petition of a governmental subdivision. So, of course, Clay County meets that requirement. We have come to you one of the reasons why we come here. We could go a number of different places, but we do recognize, and I think the latest numbers are, close to 72% of the funding we do raise comes out of Clay County. So important to keep you abreast of what's going on. Our levy for 2020, or proposed levy, I guess, is very similar to what we had in 2019. We're limited by law for an administrative levy of $250,000. The state is considering some increases to that, just kind of inflationary type things, and whether or not that gets legislatively approved this year, we'll see. The second part of it then are two different or separate levies, which are required by petition. Again, your role, if you're so inclined. The first of those we call a general levy, would be for $714,862. That is a slight increase over last year. That is capped at a maximum of 0.00798% of the taxable market value. The increase there is because of the increased market values throughout the watershed. The second levy would be the third year of a $500,000 commitment to our Wolverton Creek Restoration Project. That is ongoing. The contractor is Sellon Brothers out of Holly, Minnesota on that project, and they've struggled. That was when they were supposed to get done with phase one. They started about August of 2018. They're still out there working today. They're doing a great job, but Mother Nature has not been kind to any type of construction this year, and I'm sure you're all aware of that. So the second levy, general levy, like I said, is for $500,000 that would go to that creek restoration project. That's over $10 million for total cost. We were successful in getting grants and funding from landowners and others. It would be a $2 million commitment from the watershed to get that built. So two separate levies, both required by petition. I did include some information, regarding our expenditures. The actual cost for a landowner in Clay County or a resident of the watershed. Last year, our levy would have, for a $100,000 valuation, was $17.19. This year, that levy, same levy, which is slightly increased, actually goes down to $16.60 per 100,000 market value. And again, that's because of the increased market values. Otherwise, things kind of remain the same. We think we're using that money in wise ways. We help support agencies such as River Keepers and the Red River Basin Commission. And I included a list of the various grants that we've gotten over the last 5-6 years, almost total $25 million. And of course, you need matches to make that happen. So that $25 million is separate state and federal money that, and it's not just the watershed. You need to understand that that's Clay SWCD and the other SWCDs, all of our partners, but there's a lot of good work going on in Buffalo Red River Watershed District. And we have a lot more to do. Stony Creek restoration, something on the south branch of the Buffalo River, Whiskey Creek by Barnesville. And we're also getting involved now. We appropriated a small amount of funding, and some of you are aware of some of the things going on with soil health, and that is so exciting. I hate to be thinking about retirement because we're just looking at the tip of the iceberg there. Healthy soils, man, that could go a long ways to solving a lot of our problems. So a lot going on. I'll open it up and see if you have any questions.
Questions for these folks?
Just say because I'm on your, I don't even know what it's called, your advisory panel, we've had several good presentations on the work that the watershed's doing, including these budgets and project breakdowns. So I appreciate the work that you do. I drove by the coulee work, and there were a lot of dirt that got moved, and it looks really nice south of Wolverton, or by Wolverton, apologies.
Yeah, and of course the goal of that project is as we get that all cleaned out, that best management practices are utilized so that we just don't fill it right back up again. So that'll be there for a long, long time.
If I understand you correctly, you say if we approve this, the levy goes down to 16%. If we don't approve, it stays at 17%, is that?
No,
Am I
it's
getting- hearing this wrong?
it's an annual thing, Frank, Commissioner Gross. It goes, so last year's levy cost, the total levy for the watershed, that's insurance, administration, and the two general levies we're here for today, or last year, cost residents of the district, or Dilworth, somebody had a $100,000 home, the watershed tax was $17.19 total.
Okay.
This year, for the same $100,000 home, and going in with a slight increase in the watershed's budget, but because market values have went up across the board, the actual costs go down to $16.60. So if you were to deny these petitions, or if we couldn't find a supporter of our 103D 905 taxation process, then the watershed tax would go down considerably, because we'd be left with the $250,000 admin, which we can legally assess on our own. This is increased because of the petition process. Or we could seek, I think there's another requirement there, another way to do that. I think it's 25 or 50 citizens of the district could petition for the use of these funds. So, you know, and of course, the other thing that ties a lot of this in is the Red River Watershed Management Board. We have not been a member. I do note in the correspondence I sent out that we continue to meet with them. We've done their surveys. We've provided feedback to them. In fact, Rob Sipp is coming down to our meeting, I think on October 28th. So we continue to have those lines of communication open. This taxation, if we were members of the Red Board in 2020, the half that we would send up there is 1.6 million. So these two levies combined equal about 1.2 million. It's still less than what we would be if we were members of the Red Board.
Well, I agree with the argument about the Red Board and the Buffalo. I would like to see them members of the Red Board, but the fact of the matter is I think the position that the Buffalo Red River District has taken in that is a good one, in that the money goes out and we don't see anything coming back. So I think that's, you know, I think until there can be some assurances from the Red Board, that would be the way to go. I want to go back in history a little bit, because obviously there's not everything with the watershed has been hunky-dory lately, and I'm going to start with that. So back in 2012, there was a request to expand the district, and I spoke out to this board back at that time, and also with the city of Moorhead, that I wasn't suggesting that we oppose the expansion of the board, but I was very concerned about what the future makeup of that board would be. And I think to this day, what I thought concerned me has happened. I do want to state that, you know, you had mentioned, Bruce, that Clay County has gone from so what happened after this is Clay County went from an 83.2% tax capacity to a 72.7% tax capacity. In other words, like you said, about 72.7% of all money that comes from the watershed district comes from Clay County, and a significant portion of that 72% comes from the city of Moorhead. The drainage area went from 58 to 44.1%, and I'm talking about Clay County's numbers. The population went from 90% Clay County to 83.8%. The voting membership went from 60% to 42.85%, hence my problem. One of the things that we do get 100% of, potentially, is all the water from any ditch projects that the watershed might do. That all ultimately will either hit the Buffalo River, which hits the Red River, or it hits directly to the Red River. So we have the potential for 100% of all the water coming, and we get 42% of the vote on if it happens or not. This past year, the watershed contested the diversion authority permit granted by the DNR. Some of the reasons were they had to contest it because of the 30-day time period to make that decision. Prior to that, the Buffalo Board decided not to have a voting member on the diversion authority. They had an opportunity to have a seat at the table from the very beginning on, and Bruce, I've heard you describe this thing, and rightfully so, is the biggest water project this region will ever see. And for a water board to not have a seat at that table, I find that disturbing. Had you had a member on that board, you would have had ample opportunity to be updated on a regular basis, whether it was the Plan A that was rejected by the DNR to Plan B that was approved by the DNR. That 30 days would have been a non-argument, or should have been a non-argument, had we had somebody from the Buffalo Red there to be following this project as it went on, instead of just getting snippets from people who come to your board meetings. In all the Diversion Authority meetings I've been to, and I don't know that I've missed a Diversion Authority meeting since its inception, I have only seen one Buffalo Red River Watershed Board member at any of those meetings, and that's Jerry. And you may have been to one, Jay, one or two, but the others, I have never seen any other member at one of those meetings. For the biggest water project in this region, to not have that presence there, I just find that.
Jerry just wasn't, just for the public, Jerry just wasn't at one.
No, Jerry was at many.
Right,
And
so I think it's important.
And I'm thankful for Jerry, but
Right.
Jerry still, and heck, he didn't have a reason to go. His board denied Jerry was the one who sat on it when its inception until the final new board was done, and the new joint powers. I don't blame Jerry at all. I'm glad Jerry still showed up, but he didn't make all those meetings, and I can't blame him. Then after contesting the DNR permit, the board denied the local watershed permit from the Diversion Authority. Even with the I want to make sure I get my number, is it 52 or 54 conditions? 54 conditions by the DNR. And I know that there was even an effort amongst technical staff from the Buffalo Red and the Diversion Authority to find out what else, what of those protections might need to be changed, or did they have concern with it at DNR, or what additional ones could be done. There was even some recommended additional conditions by the Buffalo Red Board that our Diversion Authority said, we will accept those and we will work with those. Yet that permit was still denied. It was denied by 4 members, one from Rothsay, one from Audubon, one from Kent, and one from Fergus Falls. I don't recognize any of those being in Clay County. Hence my problem, going back to the change in the makeup of the board, going from a 60% majority to a minority, with getting all the water and having a vast majority of the tax capacity. That board voted against something that this board has found critical and has supported from its inception in terms of that project, to protect not only Moorhead, but vitally to our region. All we hear about is, we're not here to protect Fargo. Well, I'll tell you what, when I had to have my open heart surgery, I couldn't get it done in Moorhead. And then I get from good sources that now sometimes, I've heard of landowners going to the watershed and they're told you need to solve your own problems. That's not proper water management. I can't support your request, and I'm sorry, I can't do it. That doesn't mean you can't go to Vulcan County and ask them to do it, but if you go there, if this thing doesn't pass, when you go there, make sure you tell them that Clay County doesn't want to be paying this.
Any other comments?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2019-34.
We have a motion to approve the request. We have a second. we have a second on the motion? Hearing none, the motion fails for lack of a second, so. Thank you, gentlemen. Ladies.
I believe there's another resolution. I'll make a motion to approve 2019-35.
We have a motion, do we have a second? Do we have a second? Hearing none, the motion fails for lack of a second. So,
May I just a second, all factual, Kevin, you had done your homework. The Board of Water and Soil Resources, of course, are the ones that distributed those managers, and I was just talking to Kathy on the way up this morning, and the watershed law talks somewhat, I think, on managers or something, you know, equally distributed or something. They really don't get into detail. There isn't a whole long section as to how are those managers distributed, but I would think that that issue can always be revisited, too.
I think it will be.
Okay.
Well, and I think part of it is, we are having a discussion with Becker County and regarding the wild rice distribution today, and so for us to not approve these resolutions without having set the wheels in motion to have the discussion on distribution of managers, I think is futile, quite frankly. And so I think that if that's something this board really wants to do, then maybe we should get the ball rolling on that.
Well, you know, I've been with the district 40 years, and when, at the time in 2012, because I think we were sitting right here, and you were concerned, and you brought up the very issues that you mentioned today, and I said, you know, the watershed is supposed to be based on science, and the boards that I had worked with up until that point in time, and Kevin, you're familiar with those, I don't, the rest of the commissioners, but you know who those, I mean, we spent 20 years building Oak Park. I mean, that's the board that I had grown up with, had spent 35 years with.
Listen, this board doesn't know it.
Yeah.
I just, in this last week, I just wrote a letter of recommendation that your board should receive an award from the state with that project.
For Oak Park.
And I emphasized in that it was the board that I worked with back then. And that, you know, there's one of them I know is deceased, and there's a couple of others that are just no longer part of it. And I did that because I felt it should be a recognition, even for those no longer here. And, you know, Jerry has been a part of that from the beginning, that you all be recognized for, because that project was good. And so but that in itself, that's why I wrote the letter in support. I hope your watershed gets that award.
Thank you.
I do, I hope you do. But again, now we're talking about a board here who I think has failed us miserably in terms of what we want to get accomplished for permanent flood protection for our area. And
Commissioner Whalen and Commissioners, I feel like since I represent Board of Water and Soil Resources, to some degree I should say something. I don't think it would hurt to bring it back. I don't know what the answer would be, because it's kind of fuzzy in statute as to how that's set, as to who's going to represent the watershed district. I'm saddened by the decision today, because it's too bad. But I understand where you're coming from. It's been frustrating, in the least, to go where we have been. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and this board, some of this board, went out of its way to try and change, as you said, some of the points of the permit. We got agreement on that. That would have helped people in the area that's going to be impacted. Very little impact, but they're going to be, it would have been help. And they turned that down. And that, I think, is a real shame. And I wish the people down there could get it, straight, that that's really what's happened and how it's going to affect them. Because we're standing here, I don't think we're going to stop anything. The only thing we're going to do is cause more trouble for.
Well, and money.
Costs money, yeah.
But it's a shame, and I apologize, and we can't seem to get that over the hump, but,
I get, you know,
That's
this,
the way it is.
you know, all of you in your appointed positions, in my mind, you don't get paid nearly enough for some of the things that you have to go through. At the same point, when it comes to major issues like this, when we start having public meetings and we allow, and when I say we as boards, allow personal attacks being done in open meetings, I think that's outrageous. And I sat in some of these meetings and I listened to personal attacks of myself, other commissioners from Cass County, the mayors of Fargo and Moorhead, being personally attacked over these issues. It's just unacceptable. I'm okay with arguing the facts. I don't have any problem with that. But obviously, there was an old saying about water's for fighting and whiskey's for drinking or something like that. I don't know, there's some saying like that. So, and obviously it does happen. But, I think over the time period that we've been working on the biggest water project in this region, we have tried our best to do what Jerry talked about in terms of protecting the best that we can all those impacted areas. I would like to see the federal government try to put an interstate highway system through Clay County right now. It would never happen. With this type of attitude that we got going on and arguments over land and impacts. Unfortunately, a lot of things that we do, we're going to impact a lot of people when we set our levy in December. But we have to do it.
Well, there's been some tough decisions, and part of the boards that, the past boards, was it popular to go to Wilkin County and say 1,500 acres of Manston Slough someday will be a project? It was not with the landowners, but it was the right thing to do. Was it popular when we went over to Becker County and said there should be a Hamden Slough National Wildlife Refuge, when there was 400 people in the old Audubon school saying, get the heck out of here? But it was the right decision. I've been a part of those discussions over 40 years, but things have changed.
I mean, your board can go to Wilkin County, you can go to Otter Tail County, you can go to Becker County and ask for the same thing, and my guess is you'll certainly get it from Wilkin County. But I want them to know that me as a commissioner from Clay County, I am totally opposed to any levies from the watershed in Clay County right now, based on their opposition to this project. I understand if they want to get technical information, but this has gone beyond that. The very first clue that there was never going to be anything was when they denied even being a part of the board, when they had the opportunity to be a voting member and to have a seat at the table, and they wouldn't even do that. Yeah, I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated.
Commissioners, we came here today, I think, we knew there wasn't going to be an open arm welcome with this. But we came here out of respect.
Thank you.
Because of what you've done in the past and the fact that, a major part of the money does come from Clay County. So we respect that, respect your decision.
Obviously, to be continued. Thank you for your
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're at committee reports. Jenny, you
Thank
ready?
you. Last week I attended the MetroCog Executive Committee meeting. We had some updates from the new office. It looks great. And they've done a great job with that. There will be an open house soon for that, so you should be getting an invitation shortly. Good updates though on that. We did have some substantial conversation on the Greater Fargo Moorhead Economic Development being part of the technical advisory committee meetings. It's something that's in the bylaws, and quite frankly, in order for MetroCog to study growth areas, they need to know where they're looking at, and that's not something that they can see eye to eye on that. So we'll have some continued conversation. Grant, I know you're on that board. If you could push that at all, that would be helpful. That concludes my report on committee, but there is some exciting news from Lakes and Prairies Community Action. I think you've all got these. You're invited. They are expanding the rural routes busing service in Clay County. There's an open house on the 10th in Felton, Ulen, Holly, and Barnesville. And we've talked a lot about transportation needs in rural Clay County, and I think that Lakes and Prairies, they had secured a grant to help provide some of this, and I think they're really going to help fill a hole in that area, and so I think that's great.
Do you know what the expanded routes are? What are the improvements?
Right, I can get that to you. I think it will be on kind of a call.
On call basis, okay.
But I'll have her reach out to you.
Thank you. Kevin?
Yeah, last week, after our board meeting on Tuesday, we did meet with James and the Regional Juvenile Center regarding the items talked about today. And I just want to reiterate the frustrations that we all have with these expenditures that are coming. The only good news that I can share is that, you know, even though we didn't anticipate them, and they're still falling within an affordable range for us without having to go for additional taxpayer dollars to get. That's the only bright side to that. I was supposed to go to the Clay County Joint Powers Board on Thursday morning, but I was out and not available. So hopefully Jim or Steve, hopefully one of you guys may have made that, because I know we're working on the intergovernmental retreat, but that is all that I have.
Frank?
No report.
Jim?
I have no report. I traveled out of town for a funeral last week.
Oh, okay. I had the meeting with James from the detention center also that's been reported on. I had a meeting with consultants working on the dispatch center, and we had a lengthy discussion about some of the issues there. And I had a Minnesota Rural Counties meeting yesterday, and that was mainly approving next year's budget and appointing officers for next year and that type of thing. That was it for me. Steve?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I attended a meeting with James O'Donnell on the issue we addressed today. He also may be having another idea coming to pick here in the coming weeks on the staffing plan. I met with the department head in relation to some of the market study results that may also result in some pick items coming up in the future. At a department evaluation on Wednesday, on Thursday and Friday of last week, I attended the Minnesota Association of Counties Administrator Conference and HR Directors. I want to thank the board again for allowing me to attend conferences like that. We focused on retaining our best employees, managing remote employees, county organizational structures where we had Pine County, Carver County, Aiken County, and a representative from David Drowns talking about different changes that have been made to county government. We talked about website accessibility, and again, I just want to put a plug into our departments here. When it comes to accessibility, making sure that the documents, or what the focus was, making sure that those with disabilities, whether they're blind, whether they're hard of hearing, making sure that the information that we provide on our website is accessible to all of our citizens, and the number of statutes and regulations that people need to become in compliance with, and I'm happy to say and to report that our county is already in compliance. And so again, just want to give a shout out to the good work that our departments do with Tim and Mark and his staff. I provided each of you the legislative priority ballots that came out of our conference this past month. Just for your information, we'll be discussing this in greater detail at the district meeting on October 25th in Fergus. The county administrators picked the top 5 choices that they responded to, which will get whittled to 3, was number 4, legislation to preserve the tax base in response to tax refunds, dark stores, property tax appeals, etc. Number 13, comprehensive sustainable transportation for road and bridges. Number 8, statewide management care for procurement. Number 7, build out mental health and substance treatment in communities. And number 14, provide adequate and continuous funding for border to border. And so it was a great opportunity to get the information and also meet with other HR directors and county administrators. I also provided just an update. We were supposed to, a map of our parking lot. We were going to be addressing that parking lot last week. They had some issues with weather and also availability of the concrete people, and so they will be starting that project on Friday. I'll be going this Friday until Thursday or Friday next week. Darren has already provided an update to our email to our staff, but just so everyone is aware, there may be some parking challenges and maybe a little extra time to walk around to get to your department.
Is the weather going to be an issue this week? It looks like.
Hopefully, hopefully not. But it doesn't sound good.
We should be working yesterday and today.
And 2, I was notified, they're looking, the Minnesota Association of Minnesota Counties has established a new policy subcommittee under general government focusing on economic development, workforce development, and housing issues. They're looking for representatives from the state up to 40 people. And so if that's something of interest, they're taking applications through October 16th. And then just lastly, we have a flu shot clinic for our employees going on October 15th from 8 to 4:30 in Suite 105. If you have your county ID and your insurance card, we can get our shots there. If you have family coverage, they also can be taken care of at that time. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Kevin?
Mr. Chair, during our discussions with the watershed, I did mention about a letter that I sent out regarding there being not a nomination for Project of the Year for that Oakport project. I did that as board chair in 2017, and I did it again now. And I just want to read the last paragraph that I said in here because I did say something on behalf of the commission, and it's the same position that the board agreed to in 2017. So I said, on behalf of the Clay County Commission, we congratulate all of those who served on the Buffalo Red Watershed Board and their staff at the time of this project. Their dedication to complete this project was much appreciated by our citizens. Some of those Buffalo Red Watershed Board members are no longer with us, and this Project of the Year award would be the ultimate way to honor them for the service they did for the community of Oakport, Clay County, and the state of Minnesota. So I bring that up because I did say on behalf of the county commission, I have the full letter here. I'll have a copy made for you, and if it's okay, it could even be put in as part of the minutes of this meeting.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Anything from the county attorney's office? You're good?
No.
Colleen, anything else for us today? Nothing? We're adjourned.